The oppressive humidity of Fortaleza seemed to have a physical counterpart inside Isabella's sprawling, air-conditioned apartment. It was a different kind of humidity, a cold, emotional dampness that clung to the pristine marble floors and minimalist furniture. It was the suffocating presence of her husband, Ricardo, a man who curated their life with the same ruthless precision he used in his corporate mergers. He was speaking to her now, his voice a low, condescending murmur, critiquing the wine she had chosen for their dinner, a minor infraction for which she was expected to feel a significant and appropriate level of shame. In that moment, she felt like one of the beautiful caged birds in the antique illustrations that adorned their walls, exquisite, admired, and utterly trapped. She nodded, feigning contrition, the familiar apology already forming on her lips. But inside, a quiet seismic shift was occurring. For 10 years, she had lived inside this gilded cage, slowly forgetting the woman she used to be. The world saw a perfect couple, a respected university lecturer married to a powerful executive. But the truth was a slow, creeping poison of control and emotional neglect. This is the story of her escape from that perfect, toxic life, and the profoundly unexpected connection that would bloom in the wreckage, a connection that would challenge every convention she had ever known and force her to redefine the very meaning of love. Stay with this story to see how breaking free from one prison can sometimes lead you to a door you never even knew existed. Ricardo's toxicity was not the stuff of loud, dramatic fights, but a far more insidious form of erosion. It was in the way he would dismiss her career as a cute little hobby, despite her being a respected lecturer in Brazilian literature at the local university. It was in his subtle control of their finances, where she had access to everything but ownership of nothing, making her feel like a well-compensated employee in her own life. It was in the way he would isolate her from her old friends, subtly criticizing them, until it became easier to just stop seeing them altogether. To the outside world, particularly Ricardo's influential circle, they were a power couple. He was the brilliant businessman, and she was his elegant, intelligent wife. They hosted flawless dinner parties where the conversation was witty and the food was catered. No one saw the silent car rides home, where he would dissect her performance, pointing out every conversational misstep. No one saw the loneliness that consumed her as she lay awake in their vast, empty bed, next to a man who saw her as an accessory, not a partner. Her job at the university was her only sanctuary. Within the walls of her classroom, surrounded by the scent of old books and the eager minds of her students, she was not Ricardo's wife. She was Professor Montero. She was respected for her intellect, for her passion for Machado de Assis and Clarice Lispector. Here, her voice mattered. Here, she felt alive, a stark and painful contrast to the stifling silence of her home life. In her seminar on modern Brazilian poetry, there was one student who stood out, not for being disruptive, but for the startling depth of his perception. His name was Leo, a young man with intense, thoughtful eyes who was several years younger than his classmates, having started university early. He was just a face in a sea of faces, a name on a roster, but his contributions to class discussions were always insightful, pushing his peers and even Isabella herself to think more deeply. One afternoon, during a discussion of a particularly dense Cecilia Meirelles poem, Leo offered an interpretation so unique, so profoundly sensitive to the poem's undercurrents of loss and resilience, that it left Isabella momentarily speechless. It wasn't just smart, it was wise. For a brief professional moment, she felt a powerful connection to his mind, a shared understanding of the beauty and pain in the words on the page. It was a fleeting academic spark in the darkness of her personal life. That evening, the spark was brutally extinguished. She arrived home still thinking about the classroom discussion and was met with Ricardo's cold fury. She was 15 minutes late, having stayed behind to talk to another student, and he treated it as a profound betrayal of their dinner plans with an important client. He accused her of not taking his career, their life, seriously. He made her feel small and stupid, and any lingering warmth from her day at the university vanished, replaced by the familiar, chilling emptiness. The slow, methodical erosion of her spirit had been happening for years, but she was only now beginning to see the true extent of the damage. Ricardo had not broken her with a single blow, but had worn her down with 1,000 tiny cuts, 1,000 dismissive sighs, 1,000 instances of quiet control. She had become a ghost in her own life, a pale imitation of the passionate, vibrant woman she had once been, her opinions and desires fading into the background until they were barely whispers. The contrast between her two worlds became unbearable. In her classroom, she was an authority, a source of knowledge and inspiration, her mind celebrated. At home, she was a subordinate, her thoughts and feelings irrelevant, her very presence subject to critique. The dissonance was tearing her apart, forcing her to confront a truth she had been avoiding for a decade. This was not a life. This was a slow, comfortable, and beautifully decorated death. The breaking point arrived not with a bang, but with a quiet, internal click. Ricardo was away on a business trip, and for the first time in ages, the apartment was silent, free of his oppressive energy. Isabella sat on the balcony, looking out at the twinkling lights of Fortaleza, and felt nothing. Not sadness, not anger, just a profound and terrifying void. She realized then that she would rather feel the terror of being alone than the slow suffocation of being with him. The decision, once made, was terrifyingly simple. She could not, would not, spend another year, another month, another day living this lie. The fear of leaving, of facing the unknown, was immense, but it was finally eclipsed by the even greater fear of staying, of fading away completely. She would leave Ricardo. The thought was both the most terrifying and the most exhilarating of her life. When Ricardo returned, she was ready. She had packed a single suitcase with her most essential belongings and her treasured books. She met him at the door and told him, her voice trembling but clear, that she was leaving. His initial reaction was disbelief, which quickly morphed into a condescending amusement. He treated it like a childish tantrum, assuring her she'd be back once she realized how good she had it. But when he saw the suitcase and the unshakable resolve in her eyes, his amusement curdled into a cold, menacing anger. He launched into a tirade, a torrent of verbal abuse designed to remind her of her dependence on him, of her foolishness. He threatened her financially, socially, emotionally. But his words, which once would have crushed her, now felt like hollow echoes. They had lost their power. She simply turned and walked out the door. The freedom she felt as she drove away was dizzying, a heady mixture of pure euphoria and gut-wrenching terror. She had no plan, very little money of her own, and no idea where she was going. She ended up in a small, slightly run-down apartment for rent near the university, a world away from the luxury she had just left. The paint was peeling, and the plumbing was noisy, but it was hers. The air was hers to breathe. The first few weeks were a battle against a crushing loneliness. The silence that had once felt like freedom now felt like a vast, empty expanse. She would lie awake at night, the unfamiliar sounds of the neighborhood filtering in, and be ambushed by moments of intense doubt. Had she made a terrible mistake? Had she thrown away a life of comfort and security for this small, lonely room? The academic semester drew to a close. She submitted her final grades, and her professional relationship with her students, including the quiet, insightful Leo, officially ended. She was now just Isabella Montero, a recently separated woman trying to figure out how to start her life over at 35. Her students moved on, and she prepared to face the long, empty summer alone. Months later, seeking refuge from the blistering afternoon sun, she stepped into a cool, quiet bookstore downtown. As she was browsing the poetry section, a familiar voice said her name. "Professor Montero?" She turned to see Leo standing there, looking surprised. He seemed different outside the context of the classroom, taller, more confident, a young man, not just a student. The initial awkwardness of the encounter was palpable. She was no longer his professor, but the muscle memory of that dynamic was still there. He, too, seemed unsure of the new protocol. But the shared love of books quickly bridged the gap. He asked her what she was reading, and their conversation flowed easily from there, moving from poetry to novels to life itself. For the first time, they spoke not as teacher and student, but as two equals, two people connected by a shared passion for literature and ideas. He told her about his plans to pursue a master's degree, his dream of becoming a writer. He spoke with a passion and a clarity that she found captivating. It was a conversation of a kind she hadn't had in years, one where her thoughts were met with genuine interest, not condescension. When she mentioned briefly that she had recently separated from her husband, she saw a flicker of understanding and empathy in his eyes that was completely devoid of pity. He didn't press for details, but his quiet, supportive presence was a comfort. He was a kind soul, she realized, a quality she had come to value above all others. As they parted ways, he hesitated for a moment, before asking if she might like to get a coffee sometime, just to continue the conversation. Isabella, to her own surprise, agreed without a second thought. It felt innocent, a simple meeting of two like-minded people. It did not feel like the beginning of anything more than a friendship. Over the next few months, that friendship became a lifeline for her. They met for coffee regularly, their conversations weaving through books, music, politics, and eventually, their own lives. He was an incredible listener, and with him, Isabella found herself opening up about the slow, suffocating poison of her marriage, telling him things she had never told anyone else. He never judged her. He never told her what she should have done. He simply listened, his intelligent eyes full of a compassion that felt like a healing balm on her wounded spirit. He celebrated her intellect, asking for her opinion on his writing, treating her as a respected peer. With him, she felt seen, heard, and valued in a way she hadn't felt in a decade. The shift when it happened was as subtle and undeniable as the changing of the tide. It was a shared glance across a cafe table that lasted a second too long. It was the way his hand brushed against hers as he passed her a sugar packet, sending a jolt of unexpected warmth through her. It was the slow, dawning realization that the comfort she felt with him was beginning to deepen into something else entirely. Isabella was terrified. He was her former student. He was more than 10 years her junior. The world, and especially the insular world of academia, would be merciless in its judgment. Her mind screamed at her to put up a wall, to retreat back into the safety of their platonic friendship, to protect herself from the inevitable complications. The omniscient narrator could see what Isabella could not. Leo, too, was falling in love. He had been drawn to her brilliant mind and her quiet strength in the classroom. But it was the wounded, resilient, and fiercely intelligent woman he had come to know over coffee that he was falling for. The age gap and their past dynamic meant nothing to him, eclipsed by the profound connection he felt with her. One evening, after walking her back to her apartment, the conversation dwindled, leaving a silence charged with unspoken feelings. He looked at her, his expression full of a question he seemed afraid to ask. And in that moment, Isabella decided to stop being afraid. She leaned in and kissed him, a hesitant, questioning kiss that was met with a gentleness and passion that left her breathless. It felt complicated and risky, but it also felt more right than anything had in years. They kept their burgeoning romance a secret at first, a fragile, precious thing they wanted to shield from the harsh judgment of the outside world. Isabella was still navigating the treacherous waters of her divorce, and the thought of adding another layer of scandal was daunting. They existed in a private bubble, their time together a secret source of joy and healing. The contrast between her past and present was stark. Ricardo had sought to diminish her, to make her smaller. Leo sought to build her up. He championed her work, encouraged her to start writing again, and celebrated her successes with a genuine, unselfish joy. With him, she wasn't just loved, she was cherished. She was finally, blessedly, herself. She began to laugh again, a full-throated, uninhibited laugh that had been dormant for years. She felt a lightness in her spirit, a sense of hope and rejuvenation that she thought had been permanently extinguished. This unexpected love, born from the ashes of her old life, was not just a romance. It was a resurrection of her own soul. Eventually, their secret came out, as secrets often do. A colleague saw them together, looking far too intimate to be just friends. The whispers started. Some friends were concerned, cautioning her about the age difference and the potential for professional fallout. Ricardo, upon hearing the news, was predictably venomous, his ego wounded. Isabella and Leo faced the complications head-on. They sat down and had a long, honest conversation, acknowledging the challenges, but reaffirming their commitment to each other. They were not naive. They knew their story was unconventional, but the love and respect they had for each other was real and strong, and they decided it was worth fighting for. They stopped hiding. They held hands as they walked along the beach at Iracema. They went to dinner with the few trusted friends who supported them, and they faced the questioning stares and whispers with a quiet, united dignity. Isabella realized that after surviving 10 years with Ricardo, the judgment of others held very little power over her. She came to a profound realization about love. Her marriage to Ricardo had been about fulfilling a societal expectation, about creating a life that looked perfect on the outside. Her relationship with Leo was about none of that. It was about finding a person who saw her, truly saw her, and who made her want to be the best, most authentic version of herself. Ricardo, during the divorce proceedings, tried to use her relationship with Leo as a weapon, attempting to paint her as an unstable, predatory woman. He wanted to shame her into submission. But he was facing a different Isabella now, not the timid, cowed woman he had married. She stood up to him, her voice clear and strong, refusing to be shamed for finding happiness after escaping his abuse. The day the divorce was finalized was a day of quiet, profound release. It was the official end of a long, painful chapter. She was no longer Ricardo's wife. She was free. The legal document was simply a confirmation of a liberation she had already claimed for herself months ago when she walked out his door. She often reflected on the word student. Yes, Leo had been her student. He had sat in her classroom and listened to her lectures. But the man she had fallen in love with was not that student. He was the man she had met for coffee, her intellectual equal, her friend, her supporter. The man who had seen her at her most broken and had helped her heal. She knew their story would always be unconventional, a source of gossip for some. But she refused to taint the genuine, beautiful love she had found with the stain of other people's judgment. She had not been looking for love when she left her marriage. She had been looking for herself. The fact that she had found both felt like a miracle, a gift of grace she would not apologize for. Leo's love had been instrumental in restoring her confidence. He not only admired her mind, but actively challenged and engaged with it, pushing her to pursue her own academic writing again, something Ricardo had always subtly discouraged. He saw her brilliance not as a threat, but as the most beautiful thing about her. She felt like a partner again, in every sense of the word. She was no longer defined by her relationship to a man, not as the perfect wife of a powerful executive, nor as the scandalous professor with a younger lover. She was simply Isabella, a woman who had navigated the depths of a toxic marriage, who had found the courage to escape, and who had been brave enough to embrace an unexpected love that healed her soul. Her escape from Ricardo was the true act of strength, the foundational victory of her new life. The love story with Leo was the unexpected, beautiful sunrise that came after the long, dark night of her struggle. It wasn't the reason she left, but it was the beautiful, life-affirming reward for her immense courage. In the end, she found a peace that her old, perfect life could never have offered. It was a peace born of authenticity, of living a life that was true to her own heart, regardless of how it looked to the outside world. Standing on her small apartment balcony, watching the sunset with Leo, his hand resting easily in hers, she felt no shame, no fear, only a profound and quiet gratitude for the long, difficult road that had finally led her home.